going on? Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Adeline's Horror World. My name is Adeline, but of course, you guys already know that. So, last week left off, we went on a journey with Nancy Thompson in the events of the first Nightmare on Elm Street as she faced off against Freddy Krueger. And with this review, we're going to be delving into the second installment of the franchise, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, which, as of this video being uploaded, has just celebrated its 40th anniversary. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge stars Mark Patton, Kim Myers, Robert Rusler, Hope Lange, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and is directed by Sholder. This second film is often described as the black sheep of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and that's pretty much only due to the homoeroticism present throughout and the fact that the leading actor is a gay man in real life. Just a disclaimer, I have nothing against the LGBTQIA+ community, by the way. I proudly accept them and I do support them. That is all I will say about that. Moving on. 5 years after the events of the first film, Jesse Walsh and his family moved to Springwood, Ohio, and now reside in 1428 Elm Street, the home of former survivor Nancy Thompson. As the days and weeks pass by, Jesse finds himself suffering horrific and vivid nightmares due to deceased child murderer Freddy Krueger. With each nightmare, Jesse puts the pieces together and realizes that Freddy is searching for a host in order to carry out his vicious tendencies against the Springwood kids, but in the real world. So when it came to the development of Freddy's Revenge, it all started around April of 1985, which left New Line Cinema only 7 months to write the script, shoot the entire movie, edit it in post-production, advertise it, and then release it. So in that case, the production was pretty much troubled from the very beginning. The first person to actually pitch an idea for the second film was Leslie Boehm, who would later go on to write A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, and would do uncredited script work on Jason Goes to Hell? Jason Goes to Hell? Jason Goes to Hell, I'll kill ya! Bowen's initial idea wasn't just the possession angle, by the way. He also wanted to incorporate pregnancy into the mix as well, and while New Line would only do the possession angle and didn't tackle the pregnancy angle, they did recycle that idea for the fifth movie with Alice whenever Bowen would go on to write that script. Wes Craven was actually asked to come back to direct this film, but he took one look at that script and hightailed it out of there. Craven heavily disliked the script, particularly the moment with the exploding parakeet and the moment when Freddy enters the real world in the third act during the pool massacre scene, as a lot of the kids would have been a lot bigger than Robert Englund, as he's only 5'10", and also it would have heavily contradicted the rules and boundaries that Wes set up in the first movie, but we will get onto that later. As a result, Sholder was brought on to direct, even though he did hesitate at first, saying that he had no interest in directing horror, despite him literally making a slasher film 3 years before with Alone in the Dark. Filming took place in June of 1985 in the same location as the first film, and Sholder would go on to admit that the cast and crew had very little time to prepare due to the insane amount of special effects that were going to be used in the film, which were done by Kevin Yeager and Mark Shostrom, who is mainly responsible for creating the transformation scene in which Jesse turns into Freddy. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the film's writer David Chaskin, who, alongside the crew, was completely aware that Mark Patton was a gay man, though Mark Patton at the time was closeted. As a result, they did everything in their power to outmark throughout the course of the production, what with the imagery presented throughout the film and the homoerotic subtext surrounding Jesse's character. There was originally meant to be even more subtext added to the film. For example, there was going to be a moment where Freddy stuck his finger knives into Jesse's mouth instead of just caressing his lips like he does in the final film, and understandably, Mark Patton was really uncomfortable with some of these ideas. And honestly, I really feel bad for Mark Patton. He did not deserve to go through this at all, and it really felt like that the director and the crew were out to get him throughout the course of the production. But on a side note, I actually do really like the implication that Jesse could be a closeted gay character, and honestly, I think Mark Patton is a great scream queen of the horror genre, but we will of course get to that in a little bit. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, was finally released on November the 1st of 1985, 40 years ago to this very day, and reception of the film was incredibly mixed at the time, with it mainly being deemed vastly inferior to the first film. However, the film has gained a cult following over the past 4 decades by both critics and fans, with critics having reassessed the gay themes and the overall quality of the film, and a lot of fans have come around to it, calling it an underrated installment of the franchise. Rotten Tomatoes currently has Freddy's Revenge at 44%, a significant step down in quality from the first, and the critics' consensus goes as follows. An intriguing subtext of repressed sexuality gives Freddy's Revenge some texture, but the nightmare loses its edge in a sequel that lacks convincing performances or memorable scares. Well, I disagree with the performances part, particularly with Mark Patton, but I'll delve into that later. And now for my favorite section of these reviews, Adeline's Horror World Trivia Time! Did you know that New Line Cinema initially did not ask Robert Englund to reprise his role as Freddy? Instead, they casted a stuntman to play the character, but after 2 weeks, producer Robert Shea regretted his choice. He fired the stuntman and hired Englund back onto the project. However, according to Englund, there is still a scene that remains where the stuntman is playing Freddy, and that would be the locker room shower death scene, as they never reshot it. Did you also ever realize that this is the only installment in the entire franchise that has a male lead, with every other film having a female protagonist? Finally, did you know that Robert Englund, despite being happy to have returned for this film, has said that Freddy's Revenge is his least favorite installment in the entire franchise? Yep, more than Dream Child, more than Freddy's Dead, and I find that to be very interesting. So Freddy's Revenge is one of the first films of the franchise that I vividly remember watching. It was always a film that I got some enjoyment out of, and I never really realized how hated it was for a very long time. And up until a few years ago, I never really noticed all the homoerotic subtext that was sprinkled throughout. However, I did always acknowledge that this wasn't a perfect film and that there were huge issues all throughout. So I decided to rewatch it for this review. And I really do like Freddy's Revenge. It's a really fun installment, and I think it has just as much creepy atmosphere as the first movie. But it is heavily flawed. There is so many issues from start to finish, and it really falls apart for me in the third act. But as of right now, this is one of the better installments of the franchise for me. And I'm going to tell you why. So first, let's go ahead and get my biggest positive out of the way. Mark Patton. I think he gives a terrific performance as Jesse. Yeah, he has a few iffy line deliveries here and there.
Look, you can't talk to me like that. I can't!
But I honestly think he gives one of the best performances out of the entire franchise. It's incredibly intense, and he has to go in so many different directions with his emotions as the story goes on. But Patton is incredibly believable, and he makes me root for Jesse all throughout. There are a couple moments that make me genuinely believe that he was actually petrified being around Robert Englund in the Freddy makeup, as presented by his wonderful screams. Also, Mark Patton has definitely earned his status as being the first male scream queen of the horror genre, and that alone makes the film fun to watch. Next, I think that this is easily the most menacing, most vicious version of Freddy out of the entire franchise. The design of him is great, and I love how his dialogue is even more minimal than in the first movie, and I also love that they still keep Freddy in the shadows like Wes Craven did in the first film. Most horror franchises instantly tend to show the villain out in the open instead of being in the shadows, for example, Child's Play 2, but this film doesn't. Freddy is still in the shadows all the way up until the third act, and I think it's really effective. This is not my favorite version of Freddy, but he's definitely up there, and I'm actually really glad that Robert Englund got to come back.
You are all my children now.
Next, I actually really like the nightmare sequences in this one. While the first dream tends to go for more spectacle than subtlety with the bus, the ones that do come afterwards tend to go back to the subtlety that was presented in the first film, where we don't know if Jesse is still awake and he's witnessing all of this for real, or if he's actually asleep and dreaming. It also works to go in line with Jesse's deteriorating sanity from Freddy possessing him, and it honestly works so well for the film. Next, the score by Christopher Young is very unique, and I need to go ahead and point out that this is the one installment of the entire franchise that does not use the trademark Nightmare on Elm Street theme for the entire score. The motifs and themes that Young introduces in this film are very akin to some of the other films he's worked on, like Hellraiser or even Spider-Man 3. It adds a really gothic tone and feel to the overall film, and it makes the atmosphere incredibly eerie, and it actually makes each scene feel even stranger as they go on, which is actually a very good thing. Next, most of the deaths, for the few that we do get, are pretty good, though they're not as iconic as the kills in the first one. The highlight kill for me is Ron Grady's death, as it's very simplistic yet so disturbing. Freddy does not crack a single joke or one-liner. He just menacingly steps up to Ron and kills him without any flair whatsoever. It's so gritty, it's so dark, and I freaking love it! Next, this film is really well shot, and dare I say this, it's better shot than the first. I know, unpopular opinion, but I really couldn't help but notice it this time around. Freddy's Revenge is actually really well directed in terms of the cinematography and the shots that we see throughout. My favorite shot being the single tracking shot from the basement up to Angela's bedroom during a nightmare that Jesse is having. The camera work is really neat and it's very well done, so good job, movie. Finally, the visual and practical effects are pretty damn good, especially in regards to some of the nightmare sequences, and probably my favorite scene of the entire movie, which is the scene where Jesse fully transforms into Freddy right before Ron is killed. That scene easily has some of the greatest effects I've seen out of the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and it left me in pure awe this time around. Moving on to my mixed elements, of which I have two. First, I really do like the character of Lisa, played by Kim Myers. I think the actress does a pretty decent job at playing this character, who, yes, is a rich girl that's living in the high society of Springwood, but who is also very heartfelt and very genuine in her scenes with Jesse. She never attempts to trick him or use him all throughout. She's just very tender and very sweet with him, even when Freddy is slowly making him go insane. However, there are some moments here and there where Kim Myers' acting does not match up with the rest of her performance. And also, Lisa has so many moments in the third act where she's borderline idiotic, and it's really a shame because she is set up to be pretty competent beforehand, and that would mean that the writing of the character is very inconsistent towards the end.
I'm so scared.
Jesse, what are you talking about?
Here.
Jesse, who is doing this to you?
Fred Krueger.
Jesse, she wasn't crazy. All this really happened. You can fight him.
Finally, while I do find the concept of Freddy entering the real world to be interesting, I feel that the way that it ultimately happens completely contradicts the rules and boundaries that Wes Craven brilliantly set up in the first film. In that film, Freddy was only able to enter reality whenever a character went to sleep and pulled him out of the dream world willingly. In this film, however, because he's possessed Jesse, Freddy could just run around in the open in his true form like it's another Tuesday, which makes no sense whatsoever. And while I enjoy the pool massacre scene, like I said before, it completely contradicts the stuff we learned in the first film. I think it would have been more effective had it just been Jesse committing the murders himself, with Freddy influencing him on the inside. Moving on to my negatives, of which I also have two of them. First, the pacing and structuring of this film is very messy. There will be a moment where Jesse is talking to another character, and then bam, nightmare scene. Or he'll be talking to Lisa or Ron, and then boom, another nightmare scene. Wash, rinse, repeat. And I honestly do believe that the clunkiness of the pacing does have to do with the troubled production, because they only had 7 months to make the entire movie from pre to post-production, and unfortunately, it does show in the final version. I feel that if they had had more time to write the script out more thoroughly and develop the story in more detail, then the pacing wouldn't have been so messy. Finally, I absolutely despise the way Freddy is killed in this film. I always have, and I always will. Since when did the power of love kill Freddy freaking Krueger? Yes, while the effects of Freddy melting after this happens do look cool, it makes absolutely no sense. It's not built up properly at all, except for just a few throwaway lines whenever Jesse is in the form of Freddy and he professes his love for Lisa.
I love you, Lisa.
I love you, Lisa.
Other than that, it's a really terrible way to kill off Freddy. But it's not the worst death he's had in the franchise. We'll get to that soon. So overall, guys, I really do enjoy Freddy's Revenge. It's a really fun and eerie installment of the franchise with the most menacing version of Freddy to date, a terrific lead performance by Patton, some cool nightmare sequences, and some great music by Christopher Young. I just personally find the pacing and structuring of the film to be very wonky all throughout, and it does feel a little rushed, and I still hate the way that Freddy is killed by the end. Do I recommend this film? Yeah, I actually do. If you're looking for a nightmare film that feels really different and does its own thing, then yeah, I absolutely recommend it. Now, do I think this is the black sheep of the franchise? No. Not by a long shot. I think it's just another Nightmare on Elm Street movie that falls in the tone of the original, but still does its own thing, which I honestly can't be too mad about that. I'm going to give A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, a B. So, what do you guys think of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge? Do you like this movie? Do you hate this movie? Do you love this movie? Or is it just in the middle for you? Let me know. We can discuss it in the comments below. Also, go ahead and let me know where Freddy's Revenge falls in your ranking of the entire franchise. So, next Saturday, be looking forward to my next review, which is the highly popular third installment, Dream Warriors. I'm very excited about that one. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and set your notification settings to all. That way you can be notified for all future content and videos going forward. So, anyways, guys, I guess that's pretty much it. So, anyways, I'm Adeline. This is Adeline's Horror World, of course. You guys already know that. I love all you guys to death. And until next time,